Hello and welcome. I'm Yuki. I want to talk about something a little heavier today. And if it isn't the right day for it, that's completely fine. Come back another time. When someone dies, there's a word people reach for afterwards: closure. You're expected to grieve for a while and then get closure and then move on. And there's a strange loneliness in that because after the funeral, the casseroles stop. Everyone goes back to work, and you're left holding something enormous with nowhere to put it. Where I grew up in Japan, that word doesn't really have a good translation. And I don't think that's because we grieve better. I think it's because the relationship isn't treated as something that ended. So instead of asking how to get over losing someone, I'd like to ask you something else today. Where do they live in your day now? Because in an ordinary Japanese home, there is an actual answer to that question, a physical one. Let me show you. Let's begin. In a lot of Japanese houses, there's a small wooden cabinet, often in the main room, sometimes in a corner of the bedroom. We call it the Butsudan. Inside, there's usually a photograph of the person who died, sometimes a small wooden tablet with their name on it, a little bell, a candle, a place for incense, and a small dish or cup. It isn't grand, and in a modern flat, it might be no bigger than a bookshelf. But here's what matters about it: the person has a place. Not a box in the attic and not a folder on your phone. An actual spot in the room where the family lives that everybody walks past every single day. I'd like you to hold on to that cabinet because everything else I'm going to say comes back to it. What happens at that cabinet is the part that surprises people. Something small gets given, most days, a little rice from the morning meal, put into the small dish, a cup of tea poured fresh, a piece of fruit somebody brought. If there's a cake in the house, a slice goes there first, before anyone else eats. Nobody thinks the food gets eaten. That isn't the point of it. The point is that you did something with your hands, for them, today. And there's something in that which sitting and feeling sad simply doesn't give you. Grief wants to do something, and this gives it a job that takes 30 seconds. My grandmother did this every morning of her widowhood, and it was the calmest part of her day. And people talked to them out loud in a normal voice as a matter of course. You'll hear someone tell the photograph that their granddaughter passed her exams, that the plums came early this year, that they're worried about money. Nobody in the house thinks this is strange, and nobody suggests it means you haven't accepted anything. Whatever you believe happens after death, and people here believe all sorts of things or nothing much at all, the effect on the living is the same. You still have somewhere to put the news. Because that's one of the loneliest parts of losing someone, isn't it? Not the big grief, but the small things you would have told them. My grandmother talked to my grandfather's photograph while she wiped the table, as though he'd just stepped into the next room. As a child, I found that completely unremarkable. I understand it much better now. Then there's what happens at the grave, and it's more physical than you might expect. Visiting is called ohakamayari, and families go on set occasions, around the equinoxes, in the summer, on anniversaries. You don't just stand there. You bring a bucket and a ladle, and you wash the stone. You pull the weeds around it. You scrub the moss out of the carved letters. You pour water over the top. You put fresh flowers in the holders. You light a little incense. It's a chore, really. And that's exactly why it works. You arrive with something to do, and you leave having done it. Cleaning a stone with your hands on a warm afternoon is a completely different experience from sitting alone at home with the same feelings and no outlet at all. The whole family comes. The children carry the bucket, and afterwards, everybody usually eats. Grief here is not something you do quietly on your own so as not to burden anyone. A quick pause here. I wrote the quiet reset for when you need a calmer way to sort through heavy thoughts. It's the first link in the description. Once a year, all of this becomes a festival, and this is the part I miss most. In midsummer, there's Oban, when the dead are said to come home for a few days. Families clean the house before it. Some hang a lantern outside or light a small fire at the gate, so the spirits can find their way. Offerings go on the altar, and then at the end of the few days, there's another fire, or a lantern floated down a river, to send them off again. In some places, thousands of paper lanterns are set on the water at once, each one for somebody's dead, and you stand on a bridge and watch them go. Now, you can believe as much or as little of that as you like, but look at what the calendar is doing for people. Once a year, everybody's grief comes out of the cupboard at the same time, together, with food and music and a task. And there are festival dances during Oban, actual dancing in the summer heat in a circle. Grief with some joy in it, not only weeping and not only silence. So let me stop and say plainly why I think all of this helps, because I don't think it's mystical at all. Grief with nowhere to go doesn't disappear. It waits, and then it ambushes you. In the supermarket, at a red light, on their birthday. And most of us respond to that by trying not to think about it, which works for a while and then doesn't. What a small altar and an annual festival actually do is give the feeling an appointment, a place, a time, and something to do with your hands. And when grief has somewhere to be, you can visit it instead of either avoiding it completely or being knocked over by it without warning. The other half is just as important. It's public. The whole family kneels at the same cabinet. The whole street lights lanterns in the same week. Nobody has to decide whether it's still acceptable to be sad. And I think that's what many people are really missing, more than any ritual: permission and company. There's a smaller mechanism in it too, and it took me years to notice. Because the altar is in the main room, you pass it dozens of times a day without stopping. You are not confronted, and you are not avoiding. The person is simply present at low volume all the time. And I think that steady low hum is far easier to live with than the two extremes most of us swing between, either not thinking about them at all or thinking about nothing else. There's also a formal way that everyone else finds out, and I think this is one of the most useful things in the whole custom. When someone in your family has died, you don't send the usual New Year cards that year. Instead, you send a short, plain card, well before New Year, saying that you're in mourning and won't be sending greetings this time. It's called mochu, a small printed card, nothing dramatic, but think about what it does. Everyone you know is quietly told, without you having to say the words, to 100 people separately. Nobody sends you a cheerful card in January by accident. Nobody asks how your festive season was. And for a whole year, there is a socially understood fact about you, that you are someone who is grieving, which means no one expects you to be your usual self at the office party. That's the piece I think many people are most missing. Not a ritual, but a way of letting the world know, once, so that you don't have to keep explaining yourself while you're least able to. Grief also gets a calendar here, and it runs far longer than you might expect. There are memorial gatherings at set intervals after a death. The first weeks, then the first year, then the third, the seventh, and on for decades. Relatives come, food is eaten, stories get told. And the intervals stretch out over time, which is the clever part. Nobody expects you to feel the same at year 7 as you did at week 3, but nobody expects you to be finished either. Compare that with the quiet expectation many people live under, that after a few months you should be more or less normal again. Here, you're given permission to still be in it years later, and permission to laugh at the meal too. Both at once. The way people speak about the dead is different as well. And I only noticed after living abroad. They often stay in the present tense. My grandmother would say that my grandfather likes this kind of tea. Not liked. Likes. It's a small grammatical thing that I don't think anyone does on purpose. But it keeps them a member of the family rather than a closed chapter. Their preferences still count. You still buy the sweets they liked at New Year. They get consulted, in a way. You find yourself thinking about what they'd have said and saying it out loud at the table. And a family that keeps talking about somebody keeps a lot more of them than a family that finds it too painful to mention their name. There's a custom around their belongings too, and it answers a question that I know troubles a lot of people. What on earth do you do with all their things? Here, some of it gets deliberately shared out. It's called katamiwake, dividing the keepsakes. After a death, family and close friends each take one thing to keep: a watch, a scarf, a teacup, not the whole cupboard, and not nothing at all. One object each. I think this is quietly brilliant. Keeping everything turns your home into a museum you can't move around in, and keeping nothing feels like erasing somebody. One object, held by each of the people who love them, does something different. It spreads them out across a lot of ordinary lives where they get used. My aunt still drinks her tea out of my grandmother's cup every day, and that cup is doing far more good there than it would in a box. If you're facing a house full of someone's things, that might be the kindest way through it. Choose one thing to actually use. Offer the others, one each, to the people who would want them. Children are part of all of it, and nobody shields them from it. A small child in a house with a Butsudan grows up putting the rice out and ringing the little bell. They come to the grave. They carry the bucket. They see adults cry and then eat lunch. Death isn't a thing that happens somewhere else and gets discussed in low voices in the kitchen. I'm not going to pretend that makes it easy for a child, but it does mean they aren't frightened of it, and it means the person who died stays a normal thing to talk about rather than a subject that makes the room go quiet. I knew my great grandmother's face perfectly from the photograph, and I never met her once. And there's a smaller habit inside all of it that I've come to love. The first of anything goes to them first. The first peaches of the summer, the first rice of the new harvest, a gift somebody brought back from a trip. It goes on the altar for a day, and then the family eats it. It costs nothing, and it takes a moment, but it quietly folds the person into the ordinary pleasures of the year, over and over. So they aren't only remembered on the sad days, they're there for the good ones too. If you take only one thing from all of this, that might be the gentlest version of it. When something nice happens, give it to them first, in whatever way makes sense to you. Now, I have to be honest with you, because I would be painting a false picture otherwise. Japan has not solved grief. People here are often deeply awkward about it in conversation, exactly like everywhere else. Funerals are formal and can be extremely expensive. Many younger families in small city flats don't keep a Butsudan at all anymore, and plenty of graves in the countryside now have nobody left to visit them. The traditions I've described are genuinely fading in places. So this isn't a country that mourns better than yours. It's a country that happens to have kept a few practical habits: a place in the room, a job for your hands, a date in the calendar, and permission to still be sad in public. Those are the parts worth borrowing, and you can borrow them without any of the rest. I should also say plainly that I'm not a doctor or a counselor, and this isn't advice for grief that has become too heavy to carry. If you're in that place, please talk to someone who is trained for it. A photograph and a cup of tea are a comfort. They are not a substitute for real help. So let me lay it out simply. The things that make grief lonelier are these: nowhere to put it, nothing to do with your hands, a quiet expectation that you should be finished by now, and a name that everyone has started avoiding. And the things that help are all ordinary: a place in the room where they are, something small given to them, most days, saying their name out loud, in the present tense if it comes naturally, a visit somewhere with a task attached, even if it's just tidying a small patch of ground, a date in the year that belongs to them, and letting the children see all of it. If you take one question with you, take this one. Where in your home is that person now? Not in your heart. I mean, actually, in the room. If the honest answer is a box you can't bring yourself to open, then that may be part of why the grief has nowhere to go. Which brings me back to that little wooden cabinet. A photograph, a cup of tea that nobody drinks, and a bell that gets rung by a 5-year-old who never met him. Nobody in Japan would call that healing or working through anything. It's just where he lives now. You don't need a Butsudan, a framed photograph on a shelf, and the first slice of something, and their name said out loud once in a while, is the whole of it. And if that sounds like refusing to let go, I'd say it's the opposite. It's what lets you carry them without carrying them alone. If this quiet way of thinking about memory and grief has meant something to you, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.